Hello, everybody. A very warm welcome to the latest edition of News Talk. My name is Stephanie, and as always, I'm delighted to be joined by David. Hello, David.
Hello, Stephanie. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. A big thank you. And thank you as well for saying hello, typing in the chat. I can see Yusuf is saying hello to everybody. So do please join in. We want to make this session as interactive as possible. We want to know what you think about the stories we're talking about.
Yep. And as in every week, we're going to be looking at 3 hot topics in the news. We're going to give you our opinion and we want to hear what you think. We'll ask lots of questions. So please do, as Stephanie says, please do send us lots of comments. Hello, Barbie.
Let's get started and find out what our stories are going to be this week. Now, as David said, we're talking about stories that are making news headlines across the world, and we try to choose 3 very different stories every week, stories we think you will have something to say. So please do let us know. Type in, let us know what you think.
So, story number 1. Which social media app may be banned in the US? This was big in the news last week, and it has been for some time.
And as a clue, do you notice, do you recognize that logo? What app are we talking about here? Story number 2, I'm fascinated by this story. I was just saying to David, what a great topic to talk about. I'm sure it's something we can all relate to. We're talking about unused electronic items. But our question is, how many do you think each UK home has? How many unused electronic items? That's story number 2.
That's in the UK. And we'd love to think, have you got unused electronic items in your home? And then the final one, which is really important in this country, but possibly not in your country, what is daylight saving time? And should we have it at all, or should we get rid of it?
So, as we said, 3 very, very different stories. Do let us know in the comments what you think. Umid already, yes, looking at the logo. Naziele is making a good guess there. So is Yusuf. Let's go straight in with story number 1. So, we're talking about social media here. We've discussed this a lot in the past, lots of different aspects. But today we're talking about a social media app that risks being banned in America.
Yeah, and it's interesting because according to a recent survey, because there are lots of issues around this, of course, and the principal one is security. Is it a national security threat? And a lot of governments around the world think it is. But the users themselves, in America, for example, only 50% would support a ban. And that means a lot of people do not want it banned.
Super popular app. I think because we have some accurate guesses here, we will of course reveal that we are talking about TikTok. And as David said, I mean, such a popular app. Apparently, over 2 billion global downloads of this app, available in over 150 countries. So hugely popular.
Yeah, and of course, one of the as I've said, there is the national security threat, and America is saying, yeah, we're not going to ban it, but you have to sell it because what we don't want. Really, America is saying is that the Chinese government can get access to all this personal information, all the data of all the individual users.
Absolutely, and I think that's a key point there, Yusuf. Yusuf talking about the algorithm, and this is what they're worried about. This is this key issue: is the app's algorithm, which would apparently need some kind of export license to be granted if this deal were to go ahead.
Yeah, it's like the secret source of the company, and of course what they don't want is for anybody else to have ownership of that.
So, I mean, David, TikTok, are you a TikToker?
Do I look like a TikToker? Don't you have to be 12 or something? No,
Well,
I
I mean,
look.
This is the thing. What does a TikToker look like? I mean, perhaps typically someone of a younger generation, but I don't know. I'm not actually on. I don't use TikTok, so would love to hear from you. I've typed the question in the chat. Does anybody here use TikTok? What do we think about this particular social media app?
Yeah, yeah, and of course, what many, many millions of businesses, small business in America is saying, don't ban it because I need it to do my selling, to promote myself, and that's the only social media platform I use.
Yusuf with you, David. He's not on TikTok either. Barbie. So TikTok can what do we mean overwhelm?
Oh, possibly. And somebody used to use
Possibly.
it, but now you're done, you're finished with it. Okay.
Why? Tell us why. Why did you decide to quit? We're
Yeah.
interested to know.
Yeah, but again, in favor of banning is not only the threat to national security, because according to the law in China, the companies have to share this private data with the government. But also, there's the argument that there is so much misinformation on TikTok. And apparently, I didn't understand this, but apparently, if you are Gen Z, Generation Z, TikTok tends to be the primary source that you get your news information. I wonder if that's what other people do. Where do you get your news information? Where do you get yours, Stephanie?
I think that's a really good point, David. I'm just typing in the question, where do you get your news information? I think the key thing for me is to get it from various sources. I think you can't just rely on one source, can you? So I think getting it from a variety of sources is really important. Yusuf saying a lot of fake content and bad content.
Yeah, yeah. But the counter argument, the principal counter argument is, well, actually, what about Facebook? What about Google? What about all the other social media platforms that we all have to give our personal data, our private information, and what happens to that? So the bigger argument is actually, shouldn't the government be controlling all these social media platforms better to control the information they have?
And I mean, is there a way of controlling it? Because I think as soon as they start to control things, there's always something else that pops up. Simon says it's an easy way to get famous. In fact, I was looking up the most popular TikTokers. Any idea, David? What? Any
Uh,
names spring to
well, it's
mind?
not you because you're not on it. No,
Not
no.
me. No, not me. I don't have a secret second job as a TikToker.
Somebody like, I don't know, ex-President Trump.
Well,
No.
it's nobody that we've actually heard of. I think people are sort of making this comment here that it's people using it as a way of promoting self-promotion. We had an American dancer called Charlie D'Amelio who apparently had 152 million followers.
What?
152 million people. I mean, just think about that number, 152 million people following her doing her
A
dancing on
dance.
TikTok, and she's now the second. Somebody has overtaken her. A Senegalese Italian influencer has taken the top spot, but we're talking big numbers here. I think that's the key thing.
Incredible. Incredible. The aliens, yes. I mean, it is, isn't it? It's mind-blowing, mind-boggling. But and of course, this until the next social media platform,
Well, this is
because
it, isn't it?
yeah, and everybody will leave TikTok and go to
And
go somewhere else, possibly. I don't know.
shall we
Let's
have
have
a
a
look
look.
at some vocabulary? Yes. So, I mean, we guessed this one pretty early on, didn't we? TikTok. Yes, we're talking about TikTok. And the news is that the US, so we're talking about America here, wants ByteDance to sell it. And of course, this move is likely to be blocked by China.
Yeah. So as I think Youssef correctly mentioned, talked about before, the algorithm and the algorithm is a set of mathematical instructions or rules that, especially if given to a computer, will help to calculate an answer to a problem. And I think our lives these days are governed by algorithms in one shape or form, aren't they?
Absolutely. Second word we've got is a verb, to block. I used it actually just a moment ago. I said China would likely block such a deal. If you block something, you stop something from happening or succeeding. So nice, useful verb here, to block.
Yeah. And of course, part of the argument for banning TikTok is that it is a national security threat, and that is any circumstance or event that could harm the security of a company.
Good. Okay, let's move on then to our second story, something completely different. As we said, we try to choose stories that will interest everybody. So hopefully lots of you will have views on this one. We're talking about unused electronic items. The question is, how many do you think every UK home has? So have a think about your home. How many electronic items do you have there that are actually unused? Perhaps they've broken, they don't work anymore. What do you do with them?
Yeah, and what kind of give us some names of some electronic items that you think aren't aren't recycled, aren't reused properly. Um, yeah, for example, your radio, Maria. Thank you. Um, but it is fascinating this because I think, as you were saying before, Stephanie, I mean, if you have, because of course, these items can be quite bulky or they could be really small. And if they're small in particular, what do you do with them? Do you have a local recycling center? How far is it? Is it practical to take this small item to the recycling center?
Exactly. I mean, we were talking moments before, weren't we, David, about my problem with my mouse. So I've got a mouse here that is working, but I've also got another one that isn't working. It's it's small, so I'm certainly not going to drive to my recycling tip to dispose of it, but I also can't put it in the regular bin. So these things end up sort of being in your home because we don't really know what to do with them, and we know we should dispose of them correctly. But what do we do with them?
Well, and lots of reasons connected to that. Nadiella, yeah, radio, DVD, PC, phones, and things. Yes. Any guesses on what is the most common
Oh, that's a good
household
one.
sort of gadget that people throw away or recycle or gets used? It's a pretty obvious one, actually. The most
I'm
common.
typing in the question. What's the most
Yeah,
common gadget?
yeah,
Unused gadget or
yeah.
gadget that's thrown away?
And then there's a related question actually, which I was really surprised at. This is a report from the United Nations because there are millions of tons of e-waste, they call it electronic waste, e-waste, invisible waste. And the worst offender, the worst category, i.e., the most, is what? Any ideas? Again, I was surprised at this one.
Good answers there, Simon. Radio, CD, DVD player, camera, clock. All credit goes to mobile phone. Is that your guess there, Simon? So this was the most commonly thrown away item. Yeah, cell phone in America, mobile phone in the UK.
Absolutely. Yeah, your mobile phone, your smartphone, that's the one. And then followed by that, you've got your laptops, your tablets, and then smart watches. And then of course there are smaller ones like games consoles. Um,
Of course, the other worry is that, I mean, you've got a lot of these things have got really personal data on, haven't they? I mean, I think you sort of worry you can't just take it to a recycling tip and put it away when you've got, like, I don't know, bank details stored. And even if you try to wipe things, people are very clever at accessing.
absolutely, absolutely. But that's great on the mobile phone. But this report was absolutely, because of course we're talking about in the UK, but
Mm.
globally there is something like, I don't know, millions of tons of this waste, and the worst category, and there are not 7.3 billion of these that are thrown away every year, and they are electronic toys. So electronic toys like racing cars, music toys, drones, electric trains, these are the biggest number of items that are thrown away.
I suppose as well, if we think about it logically, I mean, they're likely to be gifts, aren't they? So perhaps they're gifts that are given and the recipient doesn't actually want them, or perhaps they, I don't know, they break very easily. They lose parts. Children lose interest, don't they, in these things?
Indeed, indeed. Um, and of course, that there are dangers. Why we don't want e-waste, obviously, because of the volumes that it's causing, that we should be recycling. But apparently, if e-waste is disposed of incorrectly, you can get toxic chemicals leaking
Mm.
into the environment. And of course, all these mobile phones and tablets, they've all got, that we were talking about a couple of weeks ago, they've got precious metals in them that we need for renewable energy and infrastructure. So, we really need to be better at this whole recycling and collecting.
And
So
in fact, I think that's one of the I mean, they in this report they also do mention, don't they, suggestions, proposals that they would like to see put in place in order to help people recycle. And I think a lot of that was sort of putting the emphasis back to the sellers. So making the producers, for example, of e-goods more responsible for their collection at the end of their life. So when your washing machine has finished, perhaps retailers or sellers are required to offer some kind of free collection service.
I
How
think
that would
that's
work,
a
I
great
don't know.
idea,
A great
but
idea,
we would
yes.
pay for it, no doubt. They would increase the price and we would pay, but at least it would be collected properly and then it can be recycled properly. I don't know what people's, the industry or the sector is like in your country. I mean, is this a big issue, or I mean, are you
See, I didn't
concerned?
think it was, but I think now that you've mentioned it and now that we're talking about it, and I think how many unused electronic items we have in our home, mostly because we just don't know how to get rid of them in a safe and secure way. And we want to be responsible. So we're not just going to put it in a bin, but how do you get rid of these things? And I think that's a big issue. And I think having more information and perhaps the manufacturers taking more responsibility would facilitate that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And Simon, good point. Yeah, but as we've talked in the past about, electronic cars, electric cars, that's going to be, that is going to be massive problems in the future, isn't it? Especially with the batteries. Um, uh, and
Interesting, Vesna. In Vesna's country, there is an organisation that collects all computer components, repairs, and assembles computers for donation to children. I think that's a lovely idea.
I think it's a fantastic idea. That's very very constructive and very positive, isn't it? I think in this country we're quite good now with plastics and doing that recycling and collecting, and that is so much better. But this whole area of small, in particular, rather than the bulky ones, the small gadgets, I
Yes.
think that's a real problem for us.
So just before we check the vocabulary, we asked how many? How
Yes.
many? What do you think?
How
Give us a
many?
guess. How many unused items, electronic items, do you think the average household has? We are talking UK, but think about your house. I mean, what sort of numbers do you think we're talking about? Have a guess. Type it
Yeah.
in the chat. I know the answer, so I can't have a guess, but let us know, what do you think? Approximately, how many do you think we're talking about? So just
And
think.
before you saw the answer, Stephanie, would you have guessed that many?
No, I'd have guessed lower. But then once
Yeah,
I started thinking about my home and things that we have, I can see how it would get to that number.
yeah. Yeah.
Because we're not just talking bulky. I mean, obviously, bulky things you're likely to recycle because you can't physically keep an unused washing machine in your home. You would have to do something. But it's these small gadgets, I think, that can build up quite quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. So shall we
Let's have a
reveal
look.
the answer?
Absolutely. So let's have a look here. So the question was how many, and the answer is 20. Every UK household has 20 unused electronic items at home. Now, does that number surprise you? Let us know. What do you think about that? Do you think yours would be higher or lower than this?
Yeah. I mean, I was surprised as well. But then, as you say, when you start thinking about it, it's possibly logical, isn't it? Um, and so, as Stephanie has mentioned, so every household, so a household is used to describe something that is used in the home, household item.
A word we use a lot here, and it's a great word because it applies to so many things, is a gadget. Very generic word, a gadget, a small device or machine with a particular purpose. So we are talking electronic here, electronic gadgets, these small little devices that many of us have.
Yeah. And we also talked about bulky items. And something that is bulky is large and difficult to move or carry. And we specifically talked about washing machines are bulky, aren't they?
It's a great example there to fix that in your mind. Yes, a bulky washing machine. Very good, everybody. Let's move to the final story. Story number 3, very topical because it's imminent. What do we think about this? So, we're talking about daylight saving time. For some of us, this will mean a lot. For some of us, it might not mean anything. Um, what is it and do we need it?
So, daylight saving time or DST. Anybody explain what happens when we have DST? Um, and our country is particularly complicated. And for you guys, actually, if you're studying with us online, I think for many people it can be quite complicated because suddenly something happens, and then 6 months later it changes again. And maybe in your country it doesn't happen.
So, what is it? Let's find out. Does anybody know what do we mean by daylight saving time?
So, and when does it happen? What date?
Well, shall we? I mean, does anybody know when it happens? It's imminent. It's
Yeah.
happening very soon.
Yes, very good.
Umid.
You've got a couple of fantastic. um, Very good, Umid. Yes, daylight saving time, also referred to daylight saving times in countries like the United States and Canada. And summertime, yes, in the UK we tend to call it summertime. And what happens is, yes, the clocks in springtime,
Well, they spring forward.
they spring forward, and then in the autumn or the fall in American English,
They fall back.
so you spring forward and you fall back. Nice little mnemonic, I think it's called, is it?
Yes, it is. I'm typing it in. Spring forward and fall back. Of course, we have to use the American English here because autumn back doesn't make any sense, does it? Fall back. There we go. So that's an easy way of remembering what you need to do with the time. So we're in spring, so we're going to be moving forward, which of course
Um,
is bad news in terms of time, isn't it? Because we're losing time.
yeah, we lose 1 hour at about 1 a.m. on the Sunday morning, and then in the autumn we gain an hour as the clocks change back. Maria's already highlighted one of the big issues, and that's sleep, rest, and getting enough, because of course it changes, and your body clock has to adjust to it.
Absolutely. And I think, again, Maria is making a good point, saying that in Mexico, the northern part of the country has it, but the rest of the country doesn't. So, a lot of discrepancies going on with, for example, in America, some states have it, some states don't. I mean, it is confusing, isn't it?
It is. It is. Any ideas how many countries adopt daylight saving time? Because, of course, because it happens to us, we tend to think it happens to everybody, but that's not
We are
true
guilty
at
of that, I
all.
have to say. You sort of think everybody's doing this, but they're not, are they?
How many?
Um,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
France, yeah,
In France, definitely. Yes. And actually, most of Europe do, I think, or if not all of Europe.
I
Um,
think it's most of Europe, isn't it?
yeah.
Um, and
But
the US, I think most of the US, I think there are two states that don't in the US.
okay, Simon, nice. Once upon a time, my country was using it, but applied it. But oh, most of the people they refused, did they? Right. Um, and again, thank you. You brought up some of the positive arguments for this. It's a good way to save energy. That's one of the principal reasons that we use it, and the impact on our health. Lots of people argue it can be beneficial to your health, but others say it actually causes sleep deprivation.
So many interesting comments. Central Asian countries used to have it, but now it's cancelled. Vesna saying, and I think this is a really good point, that even though it's just 1 hour, it can make such a difference to your body clock, can't it? Your circadian rhythm, I think it's called, and it can have a big impact, even though it's an hour.
It can indeed. It can indeed. Um, and any ideas on the numbers of countries? Anybody dare to have a guess? Because we've, from how many countries are there in the world? About 200. How many actually adopt daylight saving? In Brazil, you don't have it anymore, but years ago it was used in some regions of the country, but not all. Again, that's a common, increasingly common thing, that in certain countries, certain states or areas will adopt it and others
Mm.
don't.
It's confusing within the same country. Some
Yes.
people doing something, some people not. I mean, I don't know. I think we're so used to it. It just seems part of life. You know it happens. It's annoying in March when it happens because you're losing an hour, but it's fantastic in the autumn when you gain that extra hour. I mean, what a great feeling.
Yeah, yeah. And you've quite rightly, I mean, the issue of inconvenience, having to change your clocks and remembered to change everything. And it's quite easy to forget, isn't it? Um, but the answer to the number of countries that adopt it is no, it's not half the world, because I thought it would be. That's a really nice answer. There's only 70 countries adopt it. Um, and that's
It's
only about
remarkably small, isn't it?
1 billion, 1 billion people. So the vast majority of countries don't. And the reason is that, of course, it's only important if you are not near
Near.
the,
Mm.
the equator, because if you're near the equator, then there's very little change in sunlight or daylight, isn't there? But of course, if you are further north or a lot further south, then it's quite significant, and this will help.
Look at the comment from Simon David.
It's,
Yes, because this will have a big impact, and I know a lot of you, and I have to say, because a lot of students joining my live classes, it's so late for them. And
yes,
Simon, I know you're someone that stays up so late to join my classes, and I'm so grateful that you do that. So, when the clock and getting that hour, it makes a difference, doesn't it? And I know it will make a huge difference to students joining perfectly spoken classes.
yeah, yeah. So of course it won't be next one, but the Sunday after that. So in just under 2 weeks' time, we
Is it
will be.
Sunday the 31st?
That's correct. So the following Monday, everything will be, depending on where you are, of course, then it will be different. But it is a nightmare for us, of course, to try and change all the systems. So and poor Shella, who manages everything, it's always very complicated. But yeah, we try
And
and do our
also,
best.
Exactly. And the thing is, if your country isn't adopting this, it's not in your mindset to check, is it? So it's very
It's
easy for students to miss classes because you're on the wrong time,
yeah,
if that's not something that your country does. But I certainly am very, very appreciative of people who stay up super late to join the
yeah,
classes.
yeah. Thank you. And we are really sorry if if it's working at one time of the year and then then not. Sorry, it's not us. It's the government. It's our government.
Shall we look at some of the vocabulary here then,
Yeah,
David?
yeah.
So of course the question was, what is daylight saving time? And DST is the time between March and November when, well, we said most people, but we've just found out that it's actually only
It's not
70
most.
countries. I love learning these fun facts. So we need to adjust that a little bit, don't we? When some people adjust their clocks by 1 hour.
Yeah, I mean, and a good point there. So, because on your mobile, it does it automatically. That's great. You don't need to adjust. You don't need to change your watch or your clocks because
Or
on
the car's the worst thing. Every time I forget how to do it, I do it, I check how to do it, I change it, and then 6 months later, I've forgotten how
I've
to
forgotten
change
how
it
to do
again.
it. I agree. I struggle with that. So sometimes I just leave it.
Yeah.
No daylight saving for me. So as we said, yes, to adjust. Yeah, we need to adjust the clocks by 1 hour. And if you adjust something, you change it slightly, especially to make it more correct, effective, or suitable.
And we had the word equinox. So an equinox is there are two equinoxes. So either of the two occasions in the year when the center of the sun is directly above the equator. And this means that day and night are approximately equal in length.
And as we've been talking about daylight saving, and daylight is the period when there is natural light from the sun. And isn't that the best when you get the
Yes.
natural light from the sun? And you even get sunshine, which we haven't got much of in our country at the moment.
We take anything we can get in this country. Any small, the minute the sun comes out, we're happy.
Yeah, shorts on, outside.
Absolutely. So that brings us to the end of this edition of News Talk. Time flies as always. So thank you so many comments today, which was absolutely fantastic. And remember, it's such a great way to practice your vocabulary, to practice your listening. So please do join us next time. We'll be here the same time, same place next week, but different stories.
Indeed. Thanks very much for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you next Monday, 5 o'clock UK. Still 5 o'clock.
Still
Clocks
five
won't.
o'clock. We're on the same time next week.
And spring
See you
is
then,
coming, Maria.
everybody.
Yes.
See you next time,
Bye bye.
everybody. Goodbye.